When one looks back at the 1960s, it's easy to remember great albums like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Jefferson Starship's Surrealistic Pillow, and The Doors' debut. That was just in 1967. But the 60s marked a big time in folk music. Known as the Folk Music Revival, it spawned a lot of artists, most notably, of course, Bob Dylan. He, of course, being the biggest, followed by Joan Baez, Peter, Paul and Mary, Simon and Garfunkel, the Kingston Trio, Judy Collins, Woody Guthrie, Phil Oakes, the Byrds, and many more. There was a Toronto duo, a couple, who quickly figured out that they had just as much musically as they had romantically. Ian and Sylvia Tyson. They moved from Toronto to New York City. We'll tell you about the tale of the insects in just a second, but first, a little more on Sylvia Tyson, Ian and Sylvia, on Rock History Canada. Sylvia Tyson was born Sylvia Fricker, a Canadian singer-songwriter known for heavily influences on the folk and country music field. She was born in 1940 in Chatham, Ontario. And of course, we know her as half the iconic duo of Ian and Sylvia. In the 60s, she and Ian moved to New York City hoping for management, which they got from a great man, a bigwig in the industry, Albert Grossman, who also worked with Peter, Paul and Mary and later Bob Dylan. They found their first success on Vanguard Records with Gordon Lightfoot's Early Morning Rain. That song, by the way, went to number 1 in Canada in 1965. Later in 72, they had a big hit with the number 4 charting You Were On My Mind, which was also recorded by the band We5. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Four Strong Winds. As we said off the top, of course, Ian Tyson is given sole writing credits on it. I'm not sure if he ever gave his then-wife points on the song, but Sylvia Tyson will point out that she helped out on that classic tune.
He actually got stuck on one of the lyrics, and I added one line, which is my contribution to Four Strong Winds. But our good times are all gone, and we're bound for moving on. That was my line.
Not all hit songs are created equally. You Were On My Mind was a song that was written by Sylvia Tyson, but the story we promised you, avoiding the bugs in a bathtub and creating greatness, that the band We5 recognized and recorded as well.
Well, let's talk about You Were On My Mind. Now, that is a song, it's another one of those songs in my personal life that I have sung in my head so often. It's infectious to me. Tell me about writing that.
Well, I wrote that in New York. I wrote that, well, as the legend goes, in a bathtub in a suite in the Earl Hotel in Greenwich Village, New York, which all sounds very glamorous, except that it wasn't. The reason I wrote in the bathtub, I wasn't taking a bath. It was the only place the cockroaches wouldn't go.
Oh, yeah, that's a story. By the way, though, you did not, is it true you did not know We5 had recorded the song till you heard it on the radio?
Yes, Ian and I were playing in Southern California, and we'd finished the gig, and we were driving north up the Highway 101, the West Coast Highway, to Vancouver, and it came on the radio, and we practically drove off the road. I had no idea they'd recorded it.
Leaves in the Storm. I think you told me last time we talked that's almost like a book, Under the Stars in Berlin.
That song was actually a title that came up in my novel, Joiner's Dream, in the slightly post-war period. And I realized when I wrote the book that I had all of these song titles and no music, so I thought I'd better get busy, and this song was one of the results.
I was watching this morning your chat from 3 years ago from National Music here in Calgary, and the gentleman who's talking to you had said that sometimes when you write songs, the whole thing is finished in your head. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, yeah, I tend to write that way. Years ago, I did an interview with Jean Carignan, the famous French-Canadian fiddler, and I interviewed him for Touch the Earth, the radio show that I was doing, and he said that he always worked out what he was going to play in his head before he picked up the instrument, and that intrigued me, and it's really affected my songwriting ever since. I tend to write songs out totally in my head before I put them on paper, because you forget the boring bits. You just keep the good stuff.
I'm at a point where I'm being conscious of my mind power or what I can do, and trying to do exercises and crosswords, and I think it's really good. But I would think writing like that is an amazing. I mean, it almost sounds like an arduous brain process. But did it come naturally for you?
It worked for me because at the time I was walking every morning for between 2 and 3 miles, and so when you're doing that, it's sort of like when you're driving, your mind is free to sort of wander and work on stuff, and so that worked out very well for me.
Not Quite Rain, one of my favorite, beautiful songs. Tell me about that one.
That song, I think, is very atmospheric. Obviously, it talks about meeting someone for the first time and sitting out of doors somewhere and just talking all night. And it's something we've probably, most of us, done at one point or another. And you sort of wonder, is this going to go somewhere or isn't it?
What was your first meeting like when you met Ian? And how did you meet him, by the way?
I met him through, he was working as a commercial artist in Toronto for a company called the Kenneth M. Smith Company. And his boss, Johnny Miles, where he was working, was my Toronto landlady's second ex-husband. And so they were still pretty friendly, and they had a child. And so John Miles said to Ian, I know this young woman who sings and plays. You should meet her. And Ian at that point was looking for a female partner. He had done some material with a singer called Noreen St. Pierre, and I think she wanted to work on her own. So we got together, and it just kind of clicked.
Now tell me, you've got the blues with Chris. It's Whiteley, correct?
Yes, Chris Whiteley.
Yeah, he's the multi-instrumentalist, right? I think I asked you that last time.
Yes, and you've probably heard music by the Whiteley brothers as well.
Yes, of course. That's a great lively song.
Well, I think of it sort of, if you went to your local and bellied up to the bar, you might overhear that kind of conversation.
Long Chain of Love. Were you passing a family or heirloom to the next generation? What was that song about?
Well, Cindy Church wrote the melody for that, and I wrote the lyrics. And the concept that we had a discussion about the fact that usually families are traced through the male line, and that we thought it was time we did something about tracing a family through the female line. And we used the device of the locket being handed down from one generation to another.
I remember really well knowing who both of you were, seeing you on TV. How did your friends and family react to having fame in your life?
Well, I think they were probably relieved, because pretty scary to, at age 19 to head off to Toronto to become a folk singer. And actually, one funny line, Ian's mother once told me that he turned a misspent youth into a profitable business. So I think people had mixed feelings. I mean, they were pleased for us and worried for us.
How far back did you go with, I know, Generous Heart with you and Shirley Eckhart. When did you first meet her?
I met Shirley when she recorded one of my songs, Smiling Wine, and had a hit with it, actually. So she was very young. And we stayed in touch and just started swapping ideas at one point or another. The sad thing about Generous Heart is that we had written it about 10 or 15 years ago, and I had phoned Shirley to tell her I was finally going to record it, and she was gone a week later.
That's so sad. That was a shock to me. I remember the first time I heard her. First of all, she had a very distinctive voice, which, as a music lover, I loved,
Great singer, a great musician, could play any instrument that she picked up, and a great songwriter.
Cynical love song, sort of a playful, devil-may-care sort of a feel. Love the accordion on that one. What can you tell me about that?
Well, actually, that's the first song I ever wrote on the accordion, and so a number of years ago. And it's just it is kind of playful, but I have to say I'm not that cynical.
No Crowd, No Show, another one of my favorites. The tattooed lady has put on her clothes. Tell me about that song.
Well, I guess that's about as close as I get to a protest song. You know, that last verse about the street busker and the cop saying, "Move along, everybody." You know, it just kind of, for me, gives the feeling of what's happened with certain kinds of music. We've kind of got lost in the shuffle.
The world has changed, even in my lifetime, the world has changed so much. What do you see as you look out your window?
Literally or figuratively?
Well, any way you want to. Not literally, no.
No. Well, I think that for anyone to be successful today, they have to be very computer literate. They have to be able to get their music out there online, because there are fewer and fewer places to play. And if there are places to play, they don't pay enough for you to make a living off it. So you really have to be proactive.
The songwriting process, you'd said before, well, I'm paraphrasing you. It's a ferocious it's an unforgiving thing where you're telling a story in 4 minutes. And you're doing it in your head. How has that changed for you from the beginning of writing your first song to now? Has it changed at all?
Well, the first song, I think everybody's first song, it sort of comes out of the blue, and you finally write it down and start performing it, and you don't change a line or a note. I wish that happened more often, but it happens less as you get older. You really have to learn and develop your craft.
Angels in Troubled Times, adapted from a traditional. Tell me about that song.
Angels in Troubled Times. The melody is adapted from the musical collection of John Playford, who was. I guess he might have been the first music publisher back in the 1700s. He collected all of the country dance tunes and notated them and put them in a collection for people to learn. And this particular tune was called Porter's Dream, and I learned it through Terry McKenna, who does a lot of music for Stratford. He's a lutenist. And we actually, he and I produced all of the music for my novel Joiner's Dream.
Okay, let's talk about the new album. Let's start with the first one, Sweet Agony. Love Could Hurt You or It Can Heal You. You and Cindy Church on that one.
Yes, I wrote the lyrics and Cindy wrote the melody. It's it's not a love song. It's a story about love, and the fact that it's kind of a mixed bag. The point of the song, that whoever the person is singing the song is ready to take that chance again.
I Never Got Over You, one of those One That Got Away songs. The violin is beautiful in that. Again, you and Cindy.
Yes. Yeah, Cindy had a verse and a chorus and a melody, and she was stuck, so we got together and I completed the lyrics. It's I don't know who she was thinking of. I've never asked.
Is it true that some of the basement tapes from Bob Dylan that's been releasing, you actually had in your possession?
Yes, I had it sitting in my basement, and some acetates as well of the demos that Dylan had done, and I sold the whole collection. There was no point in me having it.
How much stuff, in the National Music interview, you talk to, when you talk to Larry LeBlanc, you talk about the fact that you have kept a lot of stuff. Do you still have, your stuff, your memorabilia, your contracts? You still have all that?
I have boxes and boxes of paper in the basement. Everything from old contracts to playbills, where we appeared. I guess you just tend to accumulate that stuff. At some point I probably should donate it to the National Archives.
The last two songs, first of all, at the end of the day, going into that instrumental, Janet's Garden is one of the most beautiful endings I've ever seen of an album, and it's appropriate considering you had said that this is your last album. Tell me about, first of all, At the End of the Day, which is just gorgeous.
One of the many things I disliked about Donald Trump is that he turned me into a news junkie. And one of the things that I noticed is that all of the commentators on CNN would use the phrase, well, at the end of the day, this would happen, or at the end of the day, that would happen, you know, and I thought they're throwing away that phrase, which is actually a very meaningful phrase, and I started developing ideas on that phrase, the end of the day, you know, as the culmination of a lifetime of memories with someone you're close to.
Oh my God, very well said. And Janet's Garden, again, perfect way, an instrumental, you know, to close this record. Janet
Kerr and Susie Rodolo and I were good friends back in the early 60s. And so about 4 or 5 years ago, I stayed with Janet in France. She has a wonderful old stone farmhouse with a beautiful wild garden, lots of climbing roses and columbines and all kinds of flowers. And she of course grows fruits and vegetables also. And so I was so inspired by that I wrote this melody for her.
What was your first impression of Bob Dylan?
Well, when we met Bob, he hadn't made it. You know, he was kind of sleeping on people's couches, and then a little later, when he and Susie got together, they actually had an apartment. But it was Ian and I and Noel Stuckey who told Albert Grossman that he had to sign Bob, that he needed to listen to him and he had to sign him. And so perhaps that's history, I don't know. Well, one thing I noticed about Bob, because I would run into him at various times over the years, is that he has an eidetic memory. I mean, he remembers everything. And he repeated to me conversations we had had years previously, word for word, which I had no memory of. He just has that kind of mind. He's a great sponge. He absorbs everything.
Linda Ronstadt had many people that she looked up to, but you were one of them.
Well, that's very nice. I look up to her as well. I think she was the most amazing singer with a wonderful ear for a good song.
You know, there's certain oddities in music I find it hard to believe, but you have to honor the artist Billy Joel, for instance, not wanting to release any new music, but also Linda Ronstadt looking back at her recordings and saying, and not liking some of her biggest hits, but it's that as an artist, do you think part of that is not self-deprecating as much? Well, I don't know. Is it being too hard on yourself? I know you can't speak for them, but
I think one is hypercritical, both of your writing and of your performing. And there are certain things that you wrote way back when that you probably wouldn't have written now. Although I don't have a lot of apologies for what I've written. I'm quite happy with it as a rule.
When you guys first moved to New York, what was the atmosphere like for both of you? Were you scared? Were you excited? All the above?
Well, when we went to New York, it was to find a manager, and we went down with a friend who had sort of looked up who the managers in the folk scene were, and one of the names that came up was Albert Grossman, and he was the first one that we approached, and he had an office in an old mansion on Central Park West, along with George Wein, who started the Newport Jazz and Folk Festivals. And we auditioned for Albert right in the middle of this enormous high-ceilinged room that had been, I guess, the parlor in the old house. And his response was, well, I really like you, but I've just signed this trio and I don't know how much time I'm going to have. And that, of course, was Peter, Paul, and Mary. But I guess he liked us enough and thought we were maybe low maintenance and took us on.
If you could speak to that younger version of yourself, would you give her any advice, or are you just happy the way things worked out?
I've gotten to be a brat most of my professional life. I've never had to do really anything I didn't want to do. I never had somebody telling me, what to sing and how to sing, and suggesting that my songs were not good enough. I never had a problem with that.
Gordon Lightfoot, you met him and you had said you found he was kind of shy, huh, in the beginning?
Well, not shy so much as private, very private, I think. Mm. And, I think that because the songs that he wrote were so eloquent that people kind of expected him to be very verbal and outgoing. And that really wasn't Gordon. I mean, all of those songs, he sweated blood over those lyrics. I know that.
You really put a lot into your lyrics as well, so you had that in common.
Yes, well, I think we're very fortunate to be writing in the English language because it's so all-encompassing. I mean, we've stolen words and ideas from just about any country in the world, and it's broadened the English language tremendously. And I find that if a song doesn't say exactly what you want it to say, it's not that it can't be done, it's just you haven't found the right words.
4 Strong Winds. Did Ian bring that to you? Were you in the room? How did that go?
He was working on that in Albert Grossman's apartment in Midtown, New York. And we did the very first Hootenanny show together. And he played it in a room, I was there, and several of the other 4 performers on that show for the first time, and everybody just thought it was fantastic. He actually got stuck on one of the lyrics, and I added one line, which is my contribution to 4 Strong Winds.
What was the line?
But our good times are all gone, and we're bound for moving on. That was my line.
Oh, my God, that's one of the best lines in the whole thing.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I was just filling a hole at the time.
Is it true that after the Dylan song Blowing in the Wind, Ian looked at that and said, well, I can do that, and wrote 4 Strong Winds?
Well, the thing is that Dylan was very prolific, and it just seemed, he's just some kid who was writing songs, and we figured if he could write songs, we could write songs. We didn't realize at that time that nobody could keep up with his output. I
was going to interview Ian maybe 10 years ago, I'm guessing. And before I did the interview, my program director told me, he said, don't ask him stupid questions. He doesn't suffer fools. Was he correct? I didn't get to do the interview because he had to cancel it because I think he had a cold or something.
He would have been very impatient if you hadn't done your homework.
John Diefenbaker commenting on your hair.
Oh, hair that would shame the Beatles. My hair was long. It was almost waist length, but Ian's wasn't that long. It sort of came over his ears a bit. It didn't bother us, really. Kind of illustrated where John Diefenbaker was at rather than us.
Ian had said that he found Hootenanny sort of a dreadful show. Do you know why he would have said that? Well,
we were fortunate as Canadians in that we had already done a fair amount of television in Canada. So we sort of knew how it all worked, and that show was so chaotic, and also such a mixture. At that point, the West Coast folk music was very shallow, very commercial. Not that there weren't good people, but they weren't getting a lot of attention. And so we weren't big fans of West Coast folk groups. And I think there were 1 or 2 of them on that show. But it certainly did us good career-wise. I can't complain about that.
We talked about this last time with the Great Speckled Bird. Love What You're Doing, Child, which is another song that stuck in my head because I heard it on CKUA in Edmonton. But tell me about working with Todd Rundgren.
Oh, well, we recorded in Nashville with Todd Rundgren, and I don't think Nashville had ever seen anybody like Todd Rundgren. I wondered if he maybe feared for his life at times because, he's this very, very skinny guy with long hair, and the hippies weren't that popular in Nashville at the time. But he produced a great album for us.
Have you ever had a weird fan experience through the years?
Well, a couple of creepy folks that quickly got run off by whoever was doing security at whatever job we were doing. Well, like I say, I never really had problems like that, and by the time Ian and I had split, I sort of had a handle on things and knew how to deal with most situations.
Our feature on the great Sylvia Tyson, At the End of the Day, is her last album. It was released in the latter part of last year. There'll be links in the description where you can pick it up. If you want to make a donation to the channel, there's a link to PayPal. You can also join our Patreon, get early access to our videos. But subscribe, comment on our videos, like them, and share them on social media. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Canada.